Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone can hear me in the chat, just push 1. As we get a confirmation, we'll get started. All right, we got a confirmation from Woman of the Past. Good evening to you, Woman of the Past. Zor Royalty, what's going on? Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 331. Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell next to the subscribe button so that you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab that we posted today. If you want to get on the panel, there'll be a link in the chat. When you click on the link and you're sitting in the waiting room, raise your hand so that we can acknowledge you and we can advance you to the panel. E Cool Flame, thank you for the compliments, and welcome to the panel. Excuse me. Mega Montana, what's going on? All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started because we're already late. All right, first item on the docket is from the national interest. The foreign fighter jets Iran would buy if it was allowed to. The Iranian Air Force on paper is one of the biggest air arms in the world. Its order of battle includes around 350 fighters, more than twice as many as the Royal Air Force possesses. But most of Iran's fighters are old and outdated. The ones that aren't old are just new copies of old designs. The Air Force's squadrons fly American-made F-14s, F-5s, and F-4s dating from the 1970s and some 1980s vintage MiG-29s and Sukhoi fighter bombers, and a few J-7s that the Islamic Republic bought from China during the 1990s. Iran's only recent acquisitions are locally made, reverse-engineered copies of the F-5, but the country repeatedly has tried to buy new fighters if all the news reports and rumors are true. What follows is a list of fighters Iran reportedly wanted but couldn't get. MiG-31. In 1990, Tehran placed an order from Moscow for, among other weapons, 24 MiG-31 interceptors. The twin-engine MiG-31 was the Soviet Union's successor to the Mach 3 MiG-25. MiG-31 significantly could have improved Iran's ability to patrol its airspace and threaten its neighbors. But the Soviet Union collapsed before it could fill Iran's order. In 1992, Tehran tried again, ordering from cash-hungry Russia a fresh batch of MiG-29s as well as Tu-22 bombers, MiG-27 fighter bombers, and 24 MiG-31s. This time around, the United States successfully applied pressure on Russia to cancel the sale. The United States reportedly even offered to buy the MiG-31s from Russia at a higher price than Iran could afford. 9 years later, in 2001, Tehran tried one more to acquire MiG-31s and even paid for them in advance. Again, the United States leaned on Russia to cancel the contract. Sukhoi 27, Sukhoi 30. Reports abound of alleged Iranian attempts to acquire from Russia either Sukhoi 27 fighters or the modern Sukhoi 30 version of the same plane. In 2007, rumors of a contract for a whopping 250 Sukhoi 30s compelled the head of Rosaboron Export, Russia's arms export agency, to formally deny that any such sale was in the works. Iran in 2016 reportedly tried again to acquire, this is poorly written, to acquire the Sukhoi 30, but this time UN sanctions, part of the 2015 deal limiting Iran's nuclear program, complicated the effort. J-10. Iran in 1990 succeeded in buying a few J-7s from China. The J-7 is a copy of the Russian MiG-21. In the past decade, the Chinese Air Force has begun replacing many of its own J-7s with newer J-10s. The J-10 is a much more modern design. Its performance roughly matches that of the American F-16. In 2015, rumors circulated that Tehran wanted to acquire as many as 150 J-10s, but nothing came of the rumors. China, it's worth noting, is a major trading partner with the Middle East Arab states such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, both bitter rivals of Persian Iran. For China selling a few billions dollars worth of warplanes to Iran probably isn't worth the diplomatic rift with Arab governments that could result. What Iran does instead: barred from acquiring new fighters, Iran has resorted to upgrading and copying its older planes. F-4s, F-14s, and Sukhoi 22s have received structural repairs and new sensors and weapons. Meanwhile, Iranian engineers have torn apart, studied, and copied the simple, lightweight F-5 and produced at least two kinds of clones. The Sakir apparently makes the fuselage of an unflyable F-5 with new twin tail fins, replacing the old single fin. Iran reportedly has built 9 Sukhois since the first type of appearance in 2004. In 2018, Iran revealed another F-5 clone, the 2C Corsair. Iranian state media claimed that the Corsair is 100% locally made, but as with the Sukhoi, it's possible that Iran is basing the new fighter on old stored F-5 frames rather than building airframes from scratch. Frustrated for decades in its attempts to buy new fighters, Iran have no choice but to endlessly upgrade old planes. But there are limits to what upgrades can achieve. An F-4 with a better radar is still an F-4, sluggish, hard to fly, decided non-stealthy. Likewise, a copy of an F-5 still performs just like an F-5 does and probably could not match the more modern warplanes that Iran's rivals operate. David Axe served as defense editor. So here's what I'm seeing from this. People are afraid to do, I should say people, but countries are afraid to do business with Iran because of the sanctions and the relationship that they have with the West. And my perspective is that I think there's still a lot of opportunity for Iran to create something more indigenously. there's still a lot of blueprints on the ground from multiple multiple countries that have developed their own concoctions of a fighter jet that probably never got off the ground. It would behoove Iran to work with North Korea, to work with Vietnam, to work with Venezuela and other countries that are struggling to find defensive capabilities, and create a more joint venture to actually build their own fighters and build their own weapons. Obviously, most of these countries have sanctions, so they have a lot of things in common. That being said, you probably can get a lot more done from a group dynamics perspective than trying to do it on your own, because you don't have the resources. You don't have the engines. You don't have the manufacturing capabilities. You don't have the um, upgraded fourth and fifth generation technology to actually implement in there. I mean, you can add a few pieces here and there, but like the article says, it's still a F4, it's still a F5. I personally wouldn't mind having an F5 as a fighter plane, if it means keeping my neighbors from coming into my airspace, then so be it. It's not like these are P-51 turboprops. These are actually these are still third and a half, 3.5 generation fighter planes. They're still remarkably keeping your airspace very safe. I think what's happening here is other countries are advancing way past them because they have good relations with the United States, but I don't see what other choice do they have. I mean, yeah, okay, you increase your air defense capabilities by buying Russian S-300, S-400 missile, surface to air missile systems, but that's only going to do so much. Once these fighter jets get into your airspace, you're going to have to chase them out, and I don't think that not having anything is going to be suitable. DE Raptor, shalom to you.
Good evening, Mike. How you doing?
All right.
Iran has got a real problem. Serious.
Yeah.
It's easier to create a missile system than it is to create an aircraft. And we're past the 60s where you can put a couple of wings on a box and put a pilot in it and say, go shoot down something. Today's aircraft is an integrated system with the AWACS, ground radars, and everything. The instruments on the airplane is like so integral to the control of that aircraft. And the pilots have a massive amount of information to choose from, targets, to choose whether to attack or defend, or the pilots have a massive amount of information, and Iran can never catch up. With if they had, say, a F-16, and they can reproduce the F-16, it would be easier for them to kind of stay in the mix than to go with a copy of the F5, because the F5 is still the technology that they have in the F5 is still not. That Boeing just came out with a version of the F5 that would outfly a lot of aircraft that even prominent nations have, and it's a trainer, but it's training people to go into F-22 and all that. So it is it's a good aircraft. I mean, an excellent aircraft. If you are going into the Air Force now and you learning on that Boeing F5 version, then you got a great airplane, because you transfer into a modern aircraft. But Iran cannot catch up unless they unless they took the sanctions off and they can get a hold of, I don't know, 50, 100 Sukhoyas, or well, even the J-10, because the J-10 will have the instrumentation, that they can use to copy. They can copy the instrumentation and try to catch up.
Mhm.
But they're in a hole. They're in a hole that they don't. As far as aircraft go, they can't get out of. They have to kind of rely on their missile defense system to to the max.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the F-16 because they were supposed to receive the F-16 in 1979, or I think it's the F-15 in 1979. And what happened was the United States actually canceled the order. Even though they built it, they canceled the order. They gave those planes to Israel, and Israel used those same planes to go in there and bomb Iraq, with nuclear facility under Saddam Hussein after the French had already built it. So the French got the money out of it. The United States sold the planes to Israel. Israel used those planes to bomb Saddam, and everybody walked away with something except for Iran and Iraq.
Yep. The United States knew what it was doing when when it kept the Russians from selling Iran their aircraft,
Hmm.
because it's just like when the Russians sold that aircraft to China. Chinese just took it apart,
Hmm.
looked at what they have,
Hmm.
say, you know what, we can upgrade this. It's not Our upgrade is not going to be perfect,
Hmm.
but we can still build something like it. And from now on, we
Hmm.
have a blueprint of a modern fighter jet, or and we can take that fighter jet and use it for wherever we want. We can use the instrumentation, to for a ground attack airplane, or
Hmm.
for bomb to run a bomb run against a target.
Hmm.
So Iran is in a place where it is stuck. It's gotta find some way of getting those airplanes.
Right.
Serious, and they gotta get them. I would say within about 5 years, because the way the technology is changing. The next with the Chinese
Hmm.
with the Chinese building aircraft of their own, they are going like America is going to find it hard to keep ahead of China,
Hmm.
because once you get the surface, what I call the box, just the box, the
Hmm.
aircraft now, because you know now, um, the best flight control system, makes that's going to give you the best turn ratio. And then you see the Russians, how the Russians be flying forward at the speed of sound, and that airplane will just turn in midair 180 and turn around and look you straight in the eye. And you, as a fighter pilot, if you are chasing that aircraft and you are not, I mean,
Hmm.
thinking very quickly, the guy that you are chasing is now going to be chasing, I mean, coming back at you.
Hmm.
So when you got an aircraft like that, you know what I'm saying? There's so much that you can do, and Iran doesn't have anything like that.
I think what
Nothing.
mhm. I think what's going to happen is that Iran is going to have to rely on Russia and China to protect its airspace, from other fighter jets coming in. They would have to chase them all out, with their fighter jets, because if they're not going to sell it to them, then I mean, yeah, you can hold off with surface to air missiles, but you still need patrol planes that invade your airspace, right?
Yep.
Uh, you have Israel and a lot of countries that Saudi Arabia and UAE and a couple other countries that have the abilities to penetrate their airspace without even being detected by the surface to air missiles. So,
I don't think the Saudis might have the ability to do it, but they don't have the heart to do it.
right.
You know what I'm saying? The Israelis don't have the heart to do it, because the Israeli pilot is Israel can say, look, you are doing this for the Jewish people, and he's going to give his life for that.
Hmm.
Whereas a Saudi, against Yemen, yeah,
Mhm.
but against Iran, no, they
Right.
will not. No.
All right, let me get to this next one. It's from the MiamiHerald.com. That there is corruption in Haiti isn't a surprise, but then a senator admitted it openly. A pro-government Haitian senator recently went on the radio and made up an unexpected admission. The Haitian government, of which he is a part of, runs on corruption. Even in a country that has become numb to such allegations, the acknowledgement was stunning. There is always money distributed for the ratification of a prime minister. Senator Cadlier Augustin said on the popular Guest of the Day program on Vision 2000, hosted by journalist Valerie Numa. This is the practice. Without these actions, some senators may not be in favor of the government in question. Haiti finds itself in the throes of another violent uprising, this time prompted by crippling fuel shortage, a free-falling currency, soaring inflation, and allegations of graft involving public officials from the highest levels of the executive branch to the parliament. And Augustine's statement highlights the current state of the Caribbean nations' volatile politics. Corruption is no longer a secret, but an open and accepted practice. And whatever shred of public trust there was in the government has evaporated. Anger that was once aimed mostly at the presidency and prime minister's office is now spreading to everything else in the country, where protesters have set police stations and businesses ablaze and targeted lawmakers, calling them thieves. Being poor and miserable is already bad and unacceptable, but add to that the feeling that the authorities, either parliament or the executive branch, are getting rich at the expense of your interests. It's the worst, said Etzer Emile, a Port-au-Prince economist. Emile said Augustine's surprising statement during an interview last month added fuel to an already blazing fire. It came days after a former ruling party ally who has joined the opposition, Senator Sorel Jacinthe, told reporters that Augustine and four others had accepted $100,000 each to confirm President Jovenel Moise's latest pick for the prime minister, Fritz William Michel. Jacinthe also accused Senate President Carl Murat Kontave of offering him money to vote in favor of Michel. An unknown government bureaucrat tapped by Morsi on July 22nd, Michel has denied the bribery allegations along with other corruption accusations that he ranked in more than $16 million in government contracts, which included the sale of goats for $500 apiece to the government while he was employed in the ministries of finance and agriculture. This is a pretty long article, so I'm not going to read all of it, but this is interesting. Let me bring Zoe Williams in. Zoe Royalty, sorry.
I don't know. Mike, by the time we were little kids at home,
Mm-hmm.
we grew up learning not only British history, but French history and Caribbean history, how these things work, how the French do things in the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And for me, I always had a very, I don't know, soft spot in my heart for Haiti because
Mm-hmm.
it shows what people can do when they put their mind to it. The Haitian nation was born out of this same kind of man, even now it's welling up in me. The Haitian nation was born out of this. Haiti freed itself and Dominican Republic from
Mm-hmm.
France at the time. which was the superpower at the time. But
Mm-hmm.
after that, the leadership that took over Haiti
Mm-hmm.
kind of installed the French um, French Civil War system in Haiti,
Mm-hmm.
and then the nation never recovered. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's like these black men. It's like they're heartless. I'm serious. It's I can never see why the Haitian people don't just I can't use the words I want to use, but get rid of all its leadership. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Duvalier had to leave. You stand outside, surround the whole parliament. Nobody move. Nobody can't get out. They can't get food in. They can't feed them. The only thing that can come out is take a helicopter that can come in there, take them out of the country, and then they don't allow this again. But I can't understand why Haitian people will not do that. They rise up, throw some people out, but they don't. The man that they should have protected, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening.
The priest, they should have protected him. I'm serious. The whole nation
Oh,
of
our speak.
Haiti should have protected that
Mm.
man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the issue with Haiti, I'm Peace Mike and Peace DE.
Hey,
What's
stop
up,
passing, stop
Joe?
passing.
Nabule Nabule. The issue with Haiti, it runs deeper than the parliament. It's the elites, the elites, the Syrian elites, the mulatto elites, and some of the black elites. They're the problem. They're the ones that um they're the cancer that's behind the problem of Haiti because they represent the U.S.'s interests on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever there's a new uprising, they always find somebody. They always find somebody who that can. They always find a new president that can represent their interests. I mean, there's word around that the elites in Haiti are already giving up on Jovenel Moise, and they already got somebody else lined up. I mean, for the most part, I think the Haitians at this point, the people on the ground, have reached their have reached their boiling point because this crisis has really pissed a lot of people off. The standard of living is atrocious. The inflation is sky high. Like shit is so expensive in Haiti. It's ridiculous now. Like when my family when they send money to Haiti, it's like $300 you send to Haiti. I mean that can only last about 2 weeks because the price of foods are so expensive and the whole Petrocaribe thing. So it's a combination of different things that has made the Haitians reach the boiling point. But there's many Haitians on the ground who are like, you know what, this is it. We have to target the elites. That's why they burned down a lot of banks. They burned down a lot of gas stations because they know that this will hurt the elites. Um, but yeah, it's the only way Haiti could ever be free is that they have to get rid of those elites. There has to be some type of commune, like some type of like Cuban revolution where like the entire Haitian elites, they just flee. They go to Miami, they go to France or Montreal, where they love to go, and then the country can be free. But it's deeper than the politicians because these politicians come and go. They come and go. The elites are still around. It's the same. It's those same couple of families. Those same, I would say, about 5, 10 families that run Haiti. They're the issue. They're the problem. And the problem is every time there's an uprising, the president is gone. The Haitian people rejoice. Then there's a transitional government. They put up a date for an election, and then there's some corruption that goes on behind the scenes. And then some guy that the Haitian people didn't vote for somehow becomes president, and then we have this endless cycle. So, um, from what I'm hearing on the ground, this is different. Like they're telling me that the Haitian people are aware of that. They're not accepting only Jovenel Moise going. They want investigations on the Petrocaribe situation. They want politicians to be arrested. It's so it's on the ground. They know what's going on. The only problem is they're not organized. So that's the opposition for that matter. So it's for me with this whole uprising in Haiti, I kept my emotions tempered because
Mhm.
I've seen this before. So I don't know.
Mhm.
People on the ground tell me it's different. I don't know. I don't know. It's just
Mhm.
mm,
I agree with you. It every time this thing starts, it seems like it's different, but it goes back, to the same thing because the people themselves do not form their own government. They kind of like somebody new steps into the thing, and then they say, you know what, I'll be your next president, and then they make him the hero until, oh my goodness, 5 years later, he's doing the same thing that the other guy did. So what you got to do is like form your own committees, your neighborhood committees.
Mhm.
You know what? And then you select the person who you want to rule Haiti.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah. I think it's going to come down to that, but I also want to take a wait and see approach to see what Moscow does with Haiti. They've stuck their foot in there already last month, so we'll see what happens. Maybe Russia could send some of the oil shipments that they do have to Haiti to subsidize some of the oil, and maybe Luke Oil or Gazprom would actually intervene in terms of like oil subsidies in that part of the region, because they do have a few refineries in Latin America, but they also still have a lot of excess oil that has not been sold off in Europe, where they can actually ship a tanker with at least 1 million barrels to Haiti and kind of quell some of the uprisings going on, because it's a perfect play for them. Russia, China always seems to be very convenient when there's instability, political instability in regions. So the United States sits back and watches the instability because they're getting off on it politically and sexually. I would say they like to see black people in dire conditions, and then that sends up the NGOs, the non-government organizations, to come in there and aid them, and create these sort of humanitarian programs, and then white people feel good about themselves. We help those people, and in reality, you actually hurt those people in the beginning. So helping them in the end doesn't really mean anything. We'll see what happens.
yeah. I mean, for me, it's I would hope Russia and China steps in before the United States steps in, because when this shit got real bad 2 weeks ago,
Hmm.
uh, there was many Haitian politicians who telling Jovenel Moise, please step down. It was a couple mayors of Haiti. They're like, please step down to prevent foreign intervention, like
Hmm.
basically the United States, because the fear is, Jovenel Moise might call the United States, like, please help me, send the Marines in, because this uprising is probably going to kill me. But I think Russia and China are just observing this. They're trying to see where can they come in to see they can make a move onto Haiti. And I've always said this, like, the Haitian people are anti-American for the most part. My father always told me, he said, like, the Haitian people know who their enemy is. He always says that they know who their enemy is. They know what the United States has done to them. They want to change. They want to deal with Russia and China.
Hmm.
Look at Dominican Republic. They cut ties with Taiwan, and they're allowing China to come into their country. So why
Yeah,
can't Haiti? Why can't Haiti do the same thing? We still take stupid ass aid from Taiwan. Taiwan hasn't done shit for us for all these years.
well,
Nothing.
yeah, and that's interesting. You brought up the Dominican Republic, because the biggest Chinese embassy is actually in DR.
Yep. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that operates as a dual base for the Chinese military. So they probably have some very high sophisticated electronics monitoring the whole entire region with Florida and Texas. They're probably using that for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next one is from RT.com. China adds over 100 tons of gold to its coffers this year amid ongoing trade war with U.S. The People's Bank of China raised bullion reserves to 62.64 million ounces, 1,957 tons. Last month from 62.45 million ounces, 1,951 tons. In August, bringing this year's gold haul to over 100 tons. Bullion hit the highest level in more than 6 years in September as slower growth, the trade war with the U.S., and rates cuts encourage investors' demand. Official purchases will likely continue to protectionist policies and geopolitical concerns add to demand, said Suki Cooper, precious metals analyst at Standard Chartered Bank. Given strained relations with the U.S., China needs a hedge against its large holdings of the dollar and gold reserves that function. Howie Lee, an economist at Singapore-based overseas Chinese banking, told Bloomberg. As China becomes a superpower in its own right, I expect more gold buying. The bullion buildup coincides with a trade war with the U.S. and a marked slowdown in growth at home. Higher level trade talks are set to resume in Washington this week. U.S. President Donald Trump said he was confident of reaching a deal, while Chinese officials are signaling their reluctance to agree to a broad trade deal, according to media reports. Trade tensions and market uncertainty have set the stage for a further boost in gold purchases by global central banks. In the first 6 months, central banks worldwide picked up 374.1 tons, helping to push a total gold demand to a 3-year high, according to the World Gold Council. Along with China, Russia has been another large buyer of the yellow metal, adding substantial quantities of bullion. So, you don't start buying gold like this unless you perceive that something is coming down the pike. I think what China is looking at, and also Russia, in addition to this, is when a global recession hits, they need a cushion, and a yellow metal is a good cushion for them.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this every Friday, Mike, on the economic talk about, that this upcoming recession is going to be, I mean, just as bad or worse than 2008. And I remember even way back in 2008, 2009, the Chinese, they started buying gold like crazy. Same thing with the Russians. That's why when the stock market was having that major rally back in like 2009, gold was going up like nuts. Like, remember when gold hit like 2000 or something? Like, they made a big ass deal about that shit. But I think another thing too is that they're buying this gold. People are saying like, oh, when a recession happens, U.S. dollars is always a safe it's always a safe investment because of deflation or whatnot. But my whole thing is, and this is a question I would ask you, like, look at the amount of stimulus the Federal Reserve did during the last recession, QE1, QE2, like, and still the economy is still on shaky grounds. Like, when this next one hits, like, what else can they do? They can't do QE4, and I mean that's going to lead to inflation. So I guess the Russian and Chinese, they see this because either the Feds are going to stimulate the economy again with the QE4, which would devastate the value of the dollar, or I don't know. So what do you think? So what do you think the Fed's going to do?
They're going to lower interest rates. I believe they already started doing that. boost spending. So in order to avoid inflation, but I think that it's too late for that when it comes to this. So Turkey has bought a lot of gold themselves, especially when the lira started spiraling out of control. They started buying gold. Um, who else has been buying gold?
India, Iran.
Yeah, India has picked up a lot of gold themselves. They're very bullish on gold. So, yeah, most of your G20 states or your G20 members have been making major investments in gold. Not for nothing either. And even the UAE tried to buy Venezuela's gold. And Venezuela has a lot of gold to offer, but some of it has been stolen by the British inside the London banks or the London reserves. So why anybody would, why any non-European person or non-Anglo-Saxon person would put their precious metals inside an Anglo-Saxon institution doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess this upcoming recession or maybe depression, depending what goes on in Europe with that whole debt crisis, but that's a whole nother fiasco, especially with Italy that we haven't discussed. So it might be, would you say stagflation? It would be like, we get some inflation and then economic growth will be stagnant, that sort of thing.
Well, the U.S. prefer inflation over deflation because once deflation gets going, you can't. It's very difficult to stop it. More difficult to stop it than inflation. And the deflated companies have all this stock that they created, and if they gotta sell it, everybody's holding on to their money for the price to keep going down. So the price keeps going down, and the U.S. government has never. Their policy is not to deal with deflation at all, just inflation. But one of the things that people don't pay attention to, well, that I would say the U.S. government don't talk about because they want to keep people from talking about it, and that's China helped the U.S. come out of that 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that China is doing, China is now trying to turn the whole desert area of China into food producing areas
Mm-hmm.
because they're very food insecure. That's one of the things that keeps China from really going more of its own way and saying, hell with you, US, we're not gonna deal with you. They don't produce like soybean, they don't produce enough beef, enough pork, things that Chinese people use a lot of. And China has to have a market where they can get these things.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to, they can push back, you understand, against the U.S. and trade war, but is until they get food, even if they get to a position of 75% food security, you're gonna see a different attitude in the Chinese, especially if they have this current leadership. Because everybody in China now is getting upset. If you see what happened to this thing in the NBA, the leadership didn't come out and say, this revolt against the NBA didn't start with the top of the Chinese thing. It starts with just the normal Chinese company and say, you know what, you can't insult China, and get away with it. We're not going to deal with you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So if they get to be about 75% food secure, you're going to see a different operation altogether in China.
Yeah, let me get to this next article from the Wall Street Journal. Latin America versus Maduro. 15 Latin nations joined the U.S. to invoke a rare treaty resolution. Meanwhile, back in Venezuela, dictator Nicolas Maduro hangs on to power with the help of Cuban intelligence. His isolation was underscored last week when 15 Latin American countries joined the US in a resolution to invoke the Rio Treaty against the Maduro regime. The 1947 Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance is a pledge by 19 nations to respond when a member is attacked or regional peace is threatened. This week, Argentina, the Bahamas, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala have all but signed up for this Rio Treaty. So let's look up what this Rio Treaty is, because we can't read this whole article because it's behind the paywall. All right, the Rio Treaty 1947 was an agreement binding the republics of the Western Hemisphere together in a mutual defense system, also called the Rio Pact or the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance. The treaty became effective on December 3rd, 1948, when 2/3 of the member states had ratified it. The central principle contained in its articles is that an attack against one is to be considered an attack against them all. This was known as the hemispheric defense doctrine. Sounds like NATO. Sounds like they had a blueprint for NATO and they kind of trickled it down and made some redactions and basically called it the Rio Treaty.
I guess that didn't work for Noriega in Panama. I mean, he was attacked, but you know, the Rio Treaty is it's basically a U.S. instrument to control the Western Hemisphere. And also, I quick point. I think Haiti was one of the countries that voted for the ratification of it under guess who, Jovenel Moise. That's another reason why the people are upset about this, because this is nothing but an instrument of U.S. imperialism.
But this goes back to 1948. Wouldn't that predates Moise, right?
Yeah, but I guess some countries didn't. I guess they wanted more countries to ratify, because Haiti never ratified it. I think
Right.
Haiti never ratified it, but I think it's just recently Joe them was like, hey, you know, we're part of the Rio Treaty.
Right, because this happened under Papa Doc. This wouldn't happen under any modern leadership at this point. But it's interesting to note that an attack against one is an attack against all. I just find that to be interesting because, you know, what happened during the Panama invasion? I mean, where was this treaty then? Where was the you know, the treaty for the Contras?
Or Haiti, when Aristide in 2004, when there was that uprising, you know, those were terrorists. You know, they could have just said, okay, we're gonna help preserve the Haitian government and clamp down on this militarist uprising. No.
Well, what about Grenada?
Yeah, Grenada, yeah.
Under Reagan. I
Yeah.
find this to be very interesting. It's the first time I've really looked into this. I've heard of it before, but I've never really looked into it. But when I'm looking at the map here, let me actually just click on it. It doesn't make any sense from here. Let me go back and go to Wikipedia. Ah, here it is. So it says the Rio Treaty also became a prototype for the formation of the North Atlantic Alliance of 1949. So this is NATO. The treaty was used many times during the Cold War, notably during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is interesting. The treaty lost its influence in 1982 when United States supported the United Kingdom in its war with Argentina over the Falkland Islands. Yet the United States invoked the treaty in the aftermath of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attack on New York City and Washington, D.C., and tried to enlist Latin American countries in its war on terror. Latin American nations voiced their support for the United States in the Rio Treaty at an OAS meeting after the attacks, but many countries did not join the United States' subsequent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. In 2002, Mexico left the treaty, arguing that a new agreement needed to be produced. So this is interesting. This is very interesting.
That part about the Falkland Islands is a fact, and I wish Nagone was here because, I mean, my father, he told me that back then many Latin American countries were pissed that the U.S. sided with the U.K. over Argentina. They were enraged about that. Like it really left a bitter taste in many Latin American a bitter taste in many Latin American countries.
But they use it for terrorism though, right? So they say that September 11th was terrorist attacks and that they invoked it then. But why don't they see that same thing for Venezuela, right? Venezuela, you have people trying to usurp the government who is democratically elected. Wouldn't they be considered terrorists?
Yep.
Wouldn't Guaido be considered an Osama bin Laden himself?
A foreign backed terrorist.
Right. Who was a citizen of Venezuela should be tried for treason for working with outside powers to destabilize their federal government. I don't see how the Rio Treaty doesn't apply here.
Yeah, it's nothing more than a vehicle of U.S. imperialism, so the U.S. can continue to impose its will on Latin America. Simply, this predates even NATO. I mean, 1947. I mean,
Yeah.
This is a major thing, and I guess after 9/11, well, before 9/11, the U.S. kind of ignored it. That's why the Rio Treaty doesn't have no power. But now, Mike, you've been reporting on this. Like, there's been renewed effort by the United States to strengthen the Rio Treaty now to take out Maduro.
Well, right here it says in Article 1, the high contracting parties formally condemn war and undertake in their international relations not to resort to the threat or the use of force in any manner inconsistent with the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations or of this treaty. So you can't use war or any sort of a physical aggression to undertake another government within these bodies of states.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, since 1947 till now, the U.S. has violated that in numerous occasions.
Or no one had access to this information at the time.
True. They didn't read the fine print.
In Article 3, it says the high contracting parties agreed that an armed attack by any state against an American state shall be considered as an attack against all American states. And consequently, each one of the said contracting parties undertakes to assist in meeting the attack in the exercise of the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense recognized by Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations. On the request of the states or states directly attacked, and until the decision of the organ of constitution of the inter-American system, each one of the contracting parties may determine the immediate measures which it may individually take in fulfillment of the obligation contained in the preceding paragraph and in accordance with the principle of continental solidarity. The organ of conciliation shall meet without delay for the purpose of examining those measures and agreeing upon the measures of a collective charter character that should be taken. And this is interesting because when you take into consideration what happened with Argentina, the charter or the treaty should have protected Argentina from the British because it threatened their stability over a stupid strip of island that is 3,000 miles away from London. Didn't make any sense because you lost so many battleships and so many other assets down there over a stupid strip of land, over a stupid rock.
It's interesting. It's and yeah, my dad told me because he remembered he remembers that war, and you know the Argentinians had that French anti-ship missile exocet.
Yeah,
Was
Exo said, yeah.
yeah, were blowing up British ships down to the water, man. And when the U.S. stepped in and sided with UK, that pissed off a lot of Latin Americans. But I think also, and I'll make this final point about this. I think this is also a vehicle so the U.S. can preserve its power over the Western Hemispheres, because we have to remember, there's a saying that says, you know, geography determines your geopolitical destiny. The U.S. is in a pretty good geopolitical geography-wise, it's doing pretty good. You know, it's allies with Canada in the north, Mexico's not strong enough to threaten it, and Brazil is, you know, kind of far away. So the U.S. is doing pretty good. This is nothing more from what I've seen. Like recently, why they're pushing the Rio Treaty now, because now they're paying attention to it, is because of China's inroads into Latin America. So they're just trying to, you know, strengthen their grip in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
It remains to be seen if that would succeed, because you already have, you know, China moving in to these countries, and I wouldn't be surprised if China's next move would be to, you know, move some country, convince some countries to get out of the Rio Treaty.
You know, it's interesting here. It shows the former members. It says Bolivia, former member, Cuba, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Mexico, and Uruguay. So, interestingly enough, it shows that Trinidad and Tobago are, you know, staunch members of it, and Venezuela. Why didn't Venezuela get out? Panama has been a member. Haiti is a member. It looks like it's always been a member from day one. I don't see Barbados on there though.
Barbados was a part of the British Empire. You gotta remember that.
Right, but at some point they would have joined, right? I mean, because if you
No,
look
because we are still a member of the. We are still governed from England.
remember the Commonwealth?
Oh yeah, you're still
Yeah, that's
governed
why.
from England. All the decisions they make local decisions. International decisions got to go to London. Suppose Barbados had a spat with St. Lucia. They can talk about it diplomatically between the two of them, but any decision have to be signed off by the Queen. But what they call a Privy Council. Well, you know this already, but there's a Privy Council. Zoe, the British system is that there's a Privy Council and the House of Lords that govern the nations of the former British Empire who stayed in, and you can make local decisions, but all your international decisions have to be signed off by the Privy Council and the House of Lords. 10 Downing Street. This treaty that you guys talking about, that was a treaty set up to defend the United States, not any country in South America. And you said it in, but you didn't say it. And the example that you gave was Argentina. The U.S. didn't defend Argentina, but 9/11, guess what? They came to South America and say, "Look, we got this problem with the rest of the with the rest of the world, this terrorists, and we're invoking the treaty. So you
Yeah.
got to defend us."
Well, it says here that No countries that become independent after 1947 have joined the treaty. Canada is yet to become a member, though it already has separate defense commitments with the US during the Falkland Wars. The United States favored the United Kingdom because Argentina had been the aggressor and because Argentina had not been attacked, as did Chile and Colombia. This was seen by most Latin American countries as the final failure of the treaty. In 2001, the United States invoked the Rio Treaty after September 11 attacks. In September 2002, citing Falklands example and anticipating the Iraq War, Mexico formally withdrew from the treaty. After the requisite 2 years, Mexico ceased to be a signatory in September 2004. In September 2000, in 2008, the Union of South American Nations created a new regional security council to take care of their own defense issues. Interesting. Let's click on that real quick, because the more you read about this, the more the deeper the rabbit hole gets.
See, one of the things that they mentioned in what you just said is that the British had attacked Argentina and took the Falklands. The British, if you take somebody else's territory, you actually declared war on them.
The Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, constitutive treaty was signed on the 23rd of May 2008 at the third summit of heads of state held in Brazil. According to the constitutive treaty, the Union headquarters will be located in Quito, Ecuador. On the 1st of December 2010, Uruguay became the 9th state to ratify the UNASUR treaty, thus giving the Union full legality. As the constitutive treaty entered into force on March 11th, 2011, the SUR became a legal entity during a meeting of foreign ministers in Mitad del Mundo, Ecuador, where they had laid the foundation stone for the Secretariat headquarters. In April 2018, 6 countries, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Paraguay, and Peru, suspended their membership. And in August of the same year, Colombia announced its withdrawal from the organization. In March 2019, Brazil's president, Jair Bolsonaro, announced his country's intention to withdraw from the organization. On March 13th, 2019, Ecuador announced that it will withdraw from the organization. The president of the country, Lenin Moreno, also asked the bloc to return the headquarters building of the organization based in Quito. In January 2019, amid growing concern about Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, a new group, ProSur, has been advanced to counteract the influence of what countries in the region call a dictatorship in Venezuela. A Chilean summit to organize ProSur was held on the 22nd of March 2019 and excluded Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, Chile, Ecuador, Uruguay, Paraguay, Peru, Guyana, Suriname were invited to join the regional bloc. So it seems like they've had multiple failures in trying to come to a security architecture, because no one in Latin America can really agree on it, probably because it's tainted with all types of Anglo-Saxon diatribe. So
Of
You
course.
get in
Because
2008, you had who in office in Brazil?
oh,
You
yeah,
know,
Dilma Rousseff, right?
that's it. No, not Rousseff.
Lula, I think
Lula.
Lula. So Brazil now was part of the BRICS, right? And the BRICS were moving to confront the U.S.
Mhm.
If I don't know if you remember an article with Lula, he was talking about what Obama did to him on the sidelines, and I think it was the G20 when
Mhm.
Obama actually came and sit down right beside him
Mhm.
and kind of like just almost physically threatened him.
We read about that. We read about that.
So what you see after that is the U.S. breaking up this organization.
Yeah.
They took out all the leaders one by one, and then Delma was the last one. Even the Argentina in Argentina right now, they having problems as well
Christina.
because of
Christina.
that because
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. Christina Faunaldo was
Yeah,
like the one of the main participants as well.
right,
She got ousted. So
right.
this is interesting. This is
Yeah,
very
this
interesting.
they try to do an end run against that American treaty,
Hmm.
and with the help of Brazil, which was a member of BRICS,
Hmm.
and Brazil now was moving towards China and Russia.
Yep.
So America saw this as, you know what, they're moving into our
Hmm.
backyard
Hmm.
and they're challenging us. Because Lula came out and says, hey, we see this as a war, you know.
The treaty is useless if the United States can invoke it when they wish to do so. So this is geopolitics is very interesting. I mean, many of you already know this, but I think what's happening here is there's templates being developed that I think a lot of foresight, not foresight, but opportunity can come out of this if ADOS was really strategic, right? If I was ADOS, right? If I was, one of these hashtaggers, right? I would develop my own charter with the United States and in Britain and in Canada and in the Caribbean and in Africa and create an African American Union and protect myself from police brutality and these other institutional forms of oppression. And if one black man is attacked, then all black men must respond to this sort of atrocity on a geopolitical stage, right?
Like you're joking about this, right?
No, I'm dead serious, man. I'm
Are
dead
you?
serious.
It's not a bad
Let
idea.
me tell you
No, no,
something. Let me tell you something about this. Even though it's not a bad idea,
it's not a bad
what?
idea.
Look at what happened in the courtroom in Houston the other day.
Oh yeah.
Battle fatigue stepped in,
Mm-hmm.
and this guy from St. Lucia stepped up and embraced a criminal who killed his brother. People don't see it as somebody killed my son, and it shake me so bad
Mm-hmm.
that I say, you know what, I have to forgive you. I can't even think about this. And
Well.
what has happened in the past,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, 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 a lot of Black American
Mm-hmm.
men can attest that this attack is relentless. When you see, like, every since
Mm-hmm.
the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
every time, like from after the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you always talk about this, that black men in America taught themselves read and write, into the Congress, built cities all over America, and were prospering. And guess what happened? The country declared war on them. They went to war physically, burned down the cities, destroyed it. Let's move forward now to Martin Luther King, Paul Robeson,
Mm-hmm.
all these guys who um, trying to get their people out from under this heavy hand boot. Were just look at what happened to Muhammad Ali. You know, look at he didn't lose his life, but he lost everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And look at Jesse Jackson after Martin Luther King. He turned completely 180. Well, he might have been turned before king was killed.
Hmm.
And he just fulfilled his duty. All of them, Andrew Young, all those people they went into the government, took their pay, and left because they saw what was going to happen to them and their families if they didn't follow. So this fear is in the heart of every Black American. It's like the women turn their sons into uh, uh, uh,
Cowards.
that's the too simple a word, but
I mean, that's harsh, Mike. That's hella
uh,
harsh.
uh,
Well, I mean, you have people saying, "I forgive you, we forgive you." I think that's a bit cowardly. But I think with a charter, I think we should find these people and make them, take a blood oath, kind of like in John Wick. Put their blood on the on the paper. You commit to this, and if
nobody's
you
going to do it.
well,
Nobody's going to do it if they know they're going to lose their life.
well, we'll do them just like the Haitian Revolution. We'll take them right down to the beach. There has to be consequences, man. Somebody has to be bold enough to step up, man. If we try to do it, they'll say, "Oh, you're not really ADOS." But then the ADOS aren't. Well, I'm not even gonna get into it, man. I'm not even gonna get into it right now. Let me get to the next
Look at what
article.
happened to Marcus Garvey. Look at Marcus Garvey. They went after Marcus Garvey.
Well, they call Marcus Garvey a scam artist too.
Mm.
Amazingly enough, by scam artists in the manosphere. Um,
No, but the key thing is, I think I understand your plan, Mike. Is like you get these different countries, these Caribbean countries, African countries who be part of this charter, and like if this happens, then what they can do is like we're not going to do business with the United States. Uh, we're not going to send our best and brightest to the United States. We're not going to do trade. I mean, at some
it's
point, like
simple things though. It's simple things. We're not gonna buy Ford vehicles. We're
yeah,
not gonna buy Apple iPhones. We're not going to do that, right? We're going to boycott you. We're going to divest. And we're going to sanction. That should be the
BDS.
yeah. That should be like the weapon of choice, right? And then if one African country is attacked from an outside nation or from terrorists, then it's the right of those in the Americas to respond to those such attacks. Through a various means. So that means if you have these terrorists coming out of Libya trafficking melanated people, I think it should be incumbent upon Black men to step up and pick up a Kalashnikov and go take these people on and push them out.
Yeah,
That's
the thing
That's
is,
not going.
our people don't think long term strategically. We don't. I think Stokely Carmichael said it best. Like
mhm.
we can mobilize, but we're not organized. Like I mean, like a Black man gets killed by a police officer, we can mobilize into the streets, but
Mhm.
we protest for like 2-3 weeks, and if the cop is found not guilty, we riot in our own neighborhoods, and then the uprising is done, and then we go back, watching big booty videos on Instagram and talk about what Malik Yoba said this week. We're just so distracted. This is our biggest problem. We're not organized, and we're easily distracted. Easily distracted.
We're
We talk
not going to
about police
change
brutality one week,
until
and then the next week we're talking about K Michelle and
Well, I think
select and non-select. Like it's stupid.
why do Caribbean men always have more fight in them than some of these other characters? What DE? Why do you think so?
because we're not here. We weren't born here
Mhm.
underneath that boot. And when you come from the Caribbean, you're around other people who look like you.
Mhm.
You understand? And you grow up. The only challenge you have is like you competing with somebody in the Caribbean. Most of the time, based on education. Not that it's not um, the same kind of racism in the
Mhm.
Caribbean as is here, but it's not like when you step out on the street in the morning, you're not fearful you're not gonna get back home at night.
Yep.
So that is one of the things that allows us to kind of to go boldly, and sometimes it does happen to us. You get out of the street and hey, why did he get killed? He was just trying to do his business. But business as usual here is not tolerated. You know what I'm saying? I remember in New York one night I heard this noise outside my um outside my backyard, and I come out and see these two Caucasian guys in the yard.
Hmm.
This in New York City. And I said, "Hello, how are you do? What are you doing in my yard?" And one guy said, "This is police business. Shut the f up and go back to sleep."
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's like you were inside my yard and telling me that. You to come knock on the door and say, "Hey, sir, we have a problem. We are looking to. We're going to be coming into your yard." That's the polite thing to do. In Barbados, the police will do that. But here in America, it's a different story.
Let me get on to the next article because I feel my blood boiling right now. All right, this one is from the Wall Street Journal. Britain EU trade blows ahead of Brexit deadline. Oh, this one's behind the paywall again. Some in Britain are sounding alarms on the potential consequences of the UK crashing out the EU without a deal. The prospects for a Brexit deal appeared to fade further on Tuesday. A British and European official traded barbs over who is to blame for the stalemate in talks. With just over a week until a critical summit in Brussels aimed at renegotiating a Brexit deal, British and EU officials clashed over the terms of a divorce and looked to shift the responsibilities for any eventual breakdown in negotiation onto the other side. This is this is going to be very complicated for the British, but at the same time, it makes sense why they're getting out at this point, um, because there is no benefit for the British to be inside the EU as it is. If anything, the EU is nothing more than a European colonialist project to keep other Europeans under the boot of the unelected officials within the European Union. And the British don't like that. The British have their own sort of supremacy that they want to run within the Commonwealth states, but the United States has a vested interest in seeing this breaking apart as well, because if everyone else shifts east to China, to Eurasia, uh, the Americans want to take control over whatever they can, which would be the United Kingdom, and pull all of their markets into U.S. spheres of influence and keep them there. That way, they don't have to tussle with the EU over the British. The British will just be absorbed into the orbits of the U.S. Sphere of influence, financially speaking, and then U.S. can take on a lot of the wealth that the British have already generated for themselves. These are two colonialist powers actually, in a spat with each other.
And also another thing too is the EU. I don't see the EU lasting to 2029 because there's too many issues with it. I think that there's also an economic angle to this as well. I mean, you have the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Italy. I forgot Italy, and then Greece and Spain. Like these countries are basically they're not doing well compared to the other European countries, and they kind of are like a burden to these other countries. But
Mm-hmm.
the way the economies are interconnected, I mean, if one goes down, then the whole thing goes down. I mean, I've read enough articles that if Italy goes down, if Italy went down the route of Greece, that'd be calamitous for the European Union. I mean, it would basically end the European Union. And there's also talk about Frexit because many people in France don't see any benefit of being with the European Union. But the only reason why they're saying that because they also have their own debt issues coming up down the pike that are worse than Italy's. So I think the UK is like, yo, this is a sinking ship. We have to get out as we can, even though once we leave, it's going to economically fuck them up, which I don't care. I mean, fuck the UK. Whatever comes out of this Brexit thing, And they deserve that shit. Fuck them niggas, man. After all what they did to black people around the world, I hope that fucking kingdom breaks apart. You know what I mean? But that's besides the point. But I think there's an economic angle to that as well, that they're trying to get the hell out. Because if this recession that's coming is going to be just as bad or worse than 2008, the European Union is fucked. Because if Italy and Spain goes down, it's over. It's over. It's over.
I don't think that.
That contagion is going to be a mess.
Yeah, I don't think that the United Kingdom would break up. They're too integrated market-wise in order to break up. That would be pulling one of the bricks out of a Jenga stack and hoping that it doesn't tip over. At some point, it will tip over, especially if you pull it slow enough or you pull it fast enough. I mean, but I do think that a Frexit would be completely determined by what happens in Africa. If those francophone states flip at some point to the other side from away from French sphere of influence, then yeah, the writing will be on the wall for the French, and it'll be game over for them. They'll probably fight their way out of it, but I don't think that the French have the military capacity to take on the continent at this point. I mean, they don't even have the capacity to take on what they consider to be terrorists in the region. So, all these nation states actually, and within Africa itself, are French speaking, would be too much for the French to take on at this point, especially because they're already developed. So, France has an uphill battle to contend with when it comes to their colonial estates that they have to maintain. They can't afford to let them go, but they also can't afford to maintain them either. So they're in a bit of a pickle. I think at some point, France would have to, France would have to decide how they're going to try to plan their exit, either out of Africa or out of the European Union. They have to figure out something, because if they want to occupy the francophone states, they would need a large military, and you would need something like an EU army to go in there and occupy them. With Germany,
that's why Macron was pushing for that EU army. That makes sense now.
Right, but does Germany really want to do that? Germany doesn't really have Germany already controls the European Union as it stands, right? They're the center of power from a manufacturing standpoint and from a logistics standpoint. It'd be interesting to see what happens, though.
Mm-hmm. It is, and you're right though. It goes back to the French speaking African countries, because if they get rid of that stupid what's it, the EFA or whatever, that franc that they have to use, because they have to give I don't know, a percentage of their national reserves to the French central bank. If they were all to say, fuck you, we're moving with the Chinese, game over. Because even Chirac, he even said it. He said like Africa's is what's maintaining the French economy. If they were to turn their back on France, the French economy would collapse overnight.
Yeah, I think that. Go ahead, DE.
One of the things that the countries on the EU, they came into the EU with the expectations of it being something similar to the US. That all, the federal government in the US, you got states like New York and California, Texas, Illinois. These states are drivers. But you got like Mississippi, Alabama, states that are in education wise, they're low on the pole, health wise, they're bottom. And the federal government collects taxes from these wealthy states. and redirects it into Mississippi to keep the state at some level, close to what the rest of the states are, to keep them in the union.
Mm-hmm.
But you got states like Italy who saw that, their manufacturing was brought up by the Germans. Their banking is taken over by the British. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
when this happened, the poor in those countries suffer. Even the poor in England suffering. Their people, unemployment is really high. That's why you see the poor people supported Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
Unemployment in England is really high. The cost of living is high. You can't find good housing because the same thing that happened to the housing market here, the prices was pushed up so high that the average person can't find a house, can't buy a house. Then you got the councils that control these huge apartment buildings and they dole it out, you know. So England's got a lot of problems, and the people in England see the EU as the enemy that caused the problem. While other countries may not want to do anything, the British people say, you know what, we are going to do something. And other governments throughout Europe have always keep the boot on their people. But the guy who was the prime minister of England at the time, he let up a little bit too much when he allowed a vote.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't allow a vote, British would have to stay. But when he allowed that vote, then he opened up the can of worms. And now the British are not only if the British got out, the UK is going to disintegrate.
Mm-hmm.
Scotland's already saying, "Hey, we're going to move it. We're going to move to the EU side." But the EU is already disintegrating because the only thing that's holding it pretty much together is the North Atlantic Treaty, NATO.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
but already Germany is far ahead of everybody else. You got the Northern Atlantic nations, Norway, Sweden. They're doing okay,
Mm-hmm.
but the southern side, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Italy, you know, and all the other little nations that just joined to get out of the Soviet because of the EU and the US pay them handsomely to come in. And when Ukraine tried to do it, is what speed up things. This rebellion going on throughout Europe now. Ukraine, when that started, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of speed up things. So this got a long history,
Mm-hmm.
but the people, the the article you read about them saying how things are going to get bad. Those are the rich people who are making out like fat cats in the EU because their companies get to sell their stuff throughout Europe. No taxes going across the border, no duties. The tunnel, everything went through the tunnel straight to France and all throughout Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But now, with them separated from Europe, they have to depend on somewhere else for Britain to make money. And the quarter mile is not going to make money in Europe because nobody's going. The Germans not going to send their cash to London now. So they had to go back to the old British Barbados and St. Lucia and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, try to pull them back into the fold. So British has somebody to support it.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me get to this next article for the nationalinterest.org. The Philippines may be about to jump ship for Russia. Why the Philippines suddenly interested in buying Russian aircraft? Not warplanes, but civilian planes for commercial purposes. Yet it suggests that Manila is eyeing a closer relationship with Moscow. There is an intention for finding Philippine partners that would probably bring in Russian jets into the country that could be used for tourism or disaster relief, said Corazon Halili, executive director of the Philippine Board of Investments, Industry Development Services, according to Russia's Sputnik News. models that are being offered right now are Sukhoi BE-200 and MS-21, not like MS-13. We think maybe for the start, we think maybe the start for the Russian companies would be general aviation rather than the big commercial things, because the two Philippine air companies are right now using more Airbus and Boeing, but the general aviation is more open for other brands, said Halili, who suggested that Russian-made aircraft could be used for charter flights between the numerous islands that comprise the Philippines. This might seem just a minor commercial aviation deal, but what's interesting is that the story ran in the defense section of Sputnik News, which hints that the Russian government and cash-strapped Russian aircraft manufacturers may be hoping to score some military contracts. Indeed, Manila seems to be drawing closer to Moscow, even as its relations with Washington have worsened. In March 2019, Russian and Philippine officials met to discuss a potential naval pact. In April, two Russian warships docked in Manila. The port visit included joint drills on navigation and communication, as well as special trainings with the quick response forces of the Philippines, according to the Philippine government. It was the sixth visit of Russian warships, which was reciprocated by the first ever Philippine Navy ship that sailed to Vladivostok in July for a naval parade marking Russian Navy Day. Interesting. A Russia-Philippine access would be incredible. It would be an incredible turnaround. The Philippines has traditionally been a U.S. ally, as well as an American colony from 1898 to 1946. While Subic Bay and Clark Field are no longer major U.S. military bases, as they were during the Cold War, there is a U.S. Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty. The Philippine Armed Forces have been equipped and trained for almost a century by the United States, which helped Manila in suppressing a communist rebellion in the 1940s, and today provides special forces, advisors, and other aid against Islamic rebels in the southern Philippines. Relations have been strained recently with the accession of Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who has moved away from Washington and drawn closer to China, even as China's neighbors nervously eye Beijing's claim over the disputed South China Sea. Military relations with Russia would burnish Duterte's nationalistic credentials and perhaps serve as a bargaining chip for more U.S. aid. But Russian bombers based on Philippines airfields ranging far over the Pacific to give the United States nightmares, that prospect is distant at best and dim at worst. But it is not heard of for nations to switch partners. A prime example is Egypt, a major recipient of Soviet weapons and advisors during the Cold War, but which is now an American client. India relied on Russian arms for years, but is now buying American equipment, while once staunch US ally Turkey is buying Russian anti-aircraft missiles. Interesting. Well, I guess anything can happen here. The Philippines are in desperate need of, of real upgrades, because the weapons or the vehicles that have been offered to the Philippines, um, from the U.S. military has been, things from the Vietnam era. It hasn't been anything modern at all.
And it seems like the U.S. just treats the Philippines as, a dumping ground of their old, military equipment. Oh yeah, we'll give you some old ass like Humvees and, well, not even Humvees, the Jeeps, and from like the fucking from like 1977 and shit like that. But that's why President Duarte is pretty much a genius, because he's having, he's moving to close relations with China. He's buying Russian equipment just to let the US know, listen, if you guys keep giving us these trash, I mean, we're gonna move closer to Russia and China, and you're gonna lose a major ally in the region. I don't know if Washington has, paid attention to this. I know they're trying to. I bet you they're just trying to figure out a way to get Duarte out of power. They're probably going to do some fuckery in the next Filipino presidential elections to try to get him out of there. But it remains to be seen. Countries are seeing. Countries have options now. You know what I'm saying? They've opened their eyes. They've seen that they have options now. It's a multipolar world, and they don't have to stick with the United States. This is what a multipolar world looks like.
Yeah.
And the elites in Washington still have not come to terms to that. They still think it's like pre 9/11.
They become select versus non-select now. So now they have a choice. Before they didn't have a choice.
A lot of these countries are jawline niggas now.
maybe geographically speaking. I think DE is eating his shepherd's pie right now.
Close. My son made something here. I'm testing it.
Oh, really?
I'm not on tomorrow. You know what happens.
We'll put out something on the community tab or a tweet.
Yeah, but Duterte is not going to be president next after his term ends. He already made that clear to everybody. But he's setting the country on a course. What he's trying to do is set the country on a course where it kind of like it's trying to play the waters between the U.S. and China and Russia. He's trying to keep himself out of a war with China over South China Sea, Philippine Sea. But he's trying to get away from this being the backyard of the U.S., where like China don't have. I mean, Philippines don't have not even the F-16.
They don't.
Good. No.
They have an F-15 though.
Which is a good airplane to defend your country with. They don't have. When they were fighting a war against the so-called guerrillas in Mindanao, they were using piston-driven aircraft.
They had Broncos. I remember that. They had Broncos.
It's Philippines really is not. You got Manila, and then you got the rest of the Philippines. And if you go out in the provinces, you would see different. I mean, they tell you when your cell phone doesn't work out there.
Okay.
So you got in Manila, your cell phone works fine. From the time you go out to the provinces, it's a guessing game. When he came into office, he said, "Yep, you gotta modernize the communication system. We gotta clean up the roads. We gotta clean up the sewers." I don't know if you heard about. He closed one island that used to be a tourist. I mean, so many tourists would go there. He used to drive the economy of all the islands around it. But the amount of trash trash and sewer and everything that goes dumped into the ocean, he just said, "You know what? I'm closing the island down. We're gonna fix up the island. I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna send my man down there." He got 6 months to clean up, and that guy went down there. Now he made an order to clean up the streets all over the Philippines. So his duty now is to make the Philippines a modern nation, and he's done. He started building bridges, repairing roads, putting in the necessary infrastructure. So the next guy that comes after him, if he follows that path, it's not going to be driven by America keeping the Philippines below the standard. Because the Philippines as a nation is going to be rising up to the level of other Southeast Asian nations, and that where everybody in the Southeast Asia Malaysia, Indonesia, all of them rose up. They are not the level of Singapore, but not far down the even Vietnam that we fought a war in is now a nation to contend with because its economy is has moved. I mean, past the Philippines.
Yeah, they're definitely a titan in
Yeah.
terms of economics.
So
Very
right,
comparable to China.
exactly. So the Philippines needed Duterte, but the thing is, uh, if the U.S. wait for another 3 years and then put their man in there, then it's going to be a problem
Hmm.
because now they're going to drive the Philippine economy back into the dark ages. But in the meantime, Duterte is not only building up the Philippines, but he's putting his people all now. The last election in the Philippines,
Hmm.
Duterte's people, the people who follow him,
Hmm.
got elected in all. I mean, to mayorships and governor all over the Philippines. So the next person who comes in to be the president of the Philippines gonna follow what Duterte is doing.
He says he's not going to be around after the next election, but I don't foresee that happen. I think they're going to keep him in power because there's
No, no,
nobody
no,
else
no.
on the island there's nobody else on the island that has any presence enough that to take on the mantle. I mean, other than even the vice president is against him, but she doesn't have anything tangible to bring to the table. So
Right.
what I'm saying here is he's the most credible person right now to run the country for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, but look, even if he said, "Well, I was going to run for president," he might not live to be to last out his presidency because right now he you can see that he's ill. Because
Think it,
when I
think it
was
might be
there,
Parkinson's disease.
yeah, he's got some autoimmune disease and it's really slowing him down since he became the president.
Yeah.
You know, you got this stress, added stress when you're the leader of the country. You got this added stress, and if you have any kind of illnesses, it will attack you. And so you can see it that he's fighting it, but he's got people that he's putting in office in different parts of the Philippines that's going to keep on pushing his agenda, the agenda he came in with, that he promised the people, and the half of the if you ask most of the Filipinos today, would they want him back in office? They would say yes, but he said he's not going to be. That's how much he has done for the Philippines
Hmm.
to change or put some changes in.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, you hear them grumbling, that they're trying to wait him out till he goes out of office, but
Hmm.
his people are going to come in and they're going to run things just the way he's doing it.
All right, let me get to this next article from Bloomberg.com. Putin's Russia is a Middle Eastern country. After centuries as the dividing line between Europe and Asia, Russia has found its natural place among the oil dictatorships. Much has been made of Russia's pivot to China as a danger to the US led world order, and the Kremlin has not done its best to play up these fears in an effort to keep Russia punching above its weight. In reality, though, Russia has pivoted more successfully toward the Middle East, where President Vladimir Putin feels at home among a particular cohort of authoritarian rulers. Last week's annual session of the Valdai Discussion Club, Putin's favorite platform for airing foreign policy ideas, was dictated to the dawn of the East and the world political order. The intellectual debate centered, of course, on China and Russia's strategic relationship to it. But the underlying problem there is that Russia doesn't have enough to offer China economically to be considered an equal partner. Russia can be a major energy supplier. It can also provide its vast territory and use its strength in the Arctic to build transport corridors for Chinese trade. There are, however, competing options for China. Besides, Russia isn't an irreplaceable market for Chinese goods, and it doesn't have much valuable technology to offer. I have to disagree with that. That raises the questions of how Russia can leverage its military might. It's one major advantage as a global power to make a partnership with China more equal. And what and that's where Russia's Middle Eastern strategy comes in. In, in a contribution for the Vladai Club, foreign policy expert Timofey Bordachev wrote, there is little doubt that Russia will remain predominantly military power in keeping with the pattern formed by its history. This runs in the blood and is part of its bedrock national tradition. Besides, the projection of Russian military capabilities in the Middle East has demonstrated the need for an efficiency of hard power for successful diplomatic manipulation. In his speech at the Vladai Club in Sochi last week, Putin addressed the Middle East before discussing Russia's economic ties with China and other Asian countries. He bragged about Russia's military success in Syria, which is indisputable, and its subsequent diplomatic victories, which are less obvious. Putin said, we have managed to launch a political process inside Syria by establishing close working relationships with Iran, Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and other Middle Eastern countries in the United States. Esteemed colleagues, you'll have to agree that such a complex diplomatic setup with very different states that have very different emotions towards each other was hard to imagine just a few years ago. But now it's a fact. We have managed it. There is some truth to the boast. Russia has used the Syrian conflict and other opportunities to build relationships with leaders who can't stand each other. Putin is on a friendly footing with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, as well as Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. See, this is really funny. I want to stop here for a second. Putin is on a friendly footing with Turkish president and Syrian dictator. See, Syrian dictator admits that there was no democracy inside Syria, but somehow no democracy inside Saudi Arabia is just fine. It's fine to have a monarchy, but it's not fine to have, one person running the country in Syria. That we just don't like things like that, right? Very interesting, and sort of racist sort of view that they have. He also has good relations with the region's other key figures, including Benjamin Netanyahu, who is still Israel's prime minister despite a humbling election last month, and with Egyptian leader Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. King Abdullah II, or the second of Jordan, was Putin's guest at the Vladai Club meeting. Putin used different means to secure these relationships. He went too far. He went to war for Assad and called Erdogan to offer support during a 2016 coup attempt. The U.S. opted not to do the same, which probably explains Erdogan's decision to buy Russian-made S-400 anti-missile systems despite U.S. protests. He ignored the backlash against Prince Mohammed for his apparent involvement in the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, breaking with longstanding practices. He has also worked with the Saudis to set an oil price acceptable to both. He backed the Iranians when the U.S. hit them with sanctions. He didn't let that alliance get in the way of constructive conversation with Netanyahu on keeping Israel from being attacked from Syrian territory. All these cases have one thing in common, though. In each, Putin backed the status quo. Like the Russian Tsars of old, who saw it as their goal to support monarchies everywhere, he is consistent. He is a consistent opponent of regime change and backer of incumbents. The one exception, Russia's unofficial backing of Libyan General Khalifa Haftar, who is fighting his country's United Nations recognized government, doesn't negate the rule. It can be argued that Haftar is the incumbent in Libya since he controls more territory than the government. Such a record endears Middle Eastern leaders to Putin. They can be reasonably certain he won't pull a fast one on them. With the US, they can't be sure. They can't be so sure since Washington has backed or directly performed several regime changes in the region. Nor can anyone be certain that the US will back its allies as consistently as Putin has backed his. In Syria, the US has long supported the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, but as announced on Monday, the US is pulling back from the areas held by Kurds to clear the way for a long-planned Turkish offensive. On a certain level, the Russian support of incumbents, regardless of their reputations and of what they do to their own people, is a demonstration of Moscow's usefulness to China and other Asian countries. Putin's other guests at the Vladai Club session included Presidents Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan and Rodrigo Duterte of the Philippines, both strong men who value Putin's backing. China, which has spent decades cultivating business projects in Africa, may on occasion need Russia's willingness to use force on incumbents' behalf. In Venezuela, Russia's backing of President Nicolas Maduro also protects Chinese investments in the region in the regime. But the Middle East is not just Putin's showroom for China's benefit. It's a region where uniquely suited to play politics. His interlocutors there are people who run their country in a similar style, and most of them, like Putin, are in charge of commodity-based economies. The Russian leader blends right in. He can even quote the Korean or the Quran with the best of them. Interesting. Putin's Russia is not really a European, a Central Asian, or even East Asian country, as its geography might suggest. It's a Middle Eastern authoritarian regime. Its pivot to the Middle East is more natural than previous attempts to cozy up to the US or the current overtures to China. Whether it's in Russian national interest is a question for Putin's successors to ponder. I think that I agree with the article in its assessment of Russia, but I don't agree with it. Agree with the connotations that it has of other countries. It just seems that it's a very racist view of countries that are not so much as European or Anglo-Saxon. It's a very weird, perverted thing for anyone to actually refer to Syria as a dictatorship, but then look to Saudi Arabia as some kind of beacon of hope, as if there was some kind of election in Saudi Arabia. I mean, you barely have female independence there. I just find that to be interesting.
Well, it's because you know, Saudi Arabia is the US's you know, a vassal state that they back, and then Syria is an ally of their of their enemies. So it's like the U.S. is very hypocritical in their foreign policy. I mean, they bash Assad for they say he barrel bombs his people, chemical weapons, and all that. Meanwhile, Al Sisi massacred thousands of people when the Egyptian military did that coup against Morsi, and then Saudi Arabia, when it just bombs Yemen continuously, bombing hospitals, bombing schools, bombing funerals, and then you don't hear the media say anything critical of that. So it's more so of just Western propaganda and all that. But the article brings up a great point. Putin. I mean, say what you want. I know in the United States, our media likes to portray Putin as like Hitler incarnate and all that, but Putin is he's brilliant. He's intelligent. This guy knows geopolitics. Like he eats, breathes, geopolitics. Like he has outsmarted the United States in every possible way. I don't think he's gotten a loss. He has taken a loss from the United States at all. I mean, the way he handled Ukraine was brilliant. Compared to what we have in the White House right now, it's kind of like, it's not a good look. I mean, we have a buffoon who just, he only uses Twitter fingers and talks a big game, but when shit gets real, he backpedals, like saying like, you cool. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's crazy to see that, looking at the different leadership qualities in Putin and why the Russians love Putin, because this guy is a real leader. He knows how to lead his people compared to this dumbass that's in the White House right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, Putin is a nationalist. You can't, like, say for instance, the U.S. bought off the prime minister of Ukraine, and every subsequent U.S. bought off every prime minister of France and England. But when it comes to Russia, in this case Putin, you can't buy him off to go to toe the line, because with him it is Russia, the nation, my country first. Just like for you, America is first, Russia is first. I am a nationalist. I'm going to do everything to protect Russia because that's what I depend on for my life. That's the way Putin is, and he's smart. You know what I'm saying? He knows he's got good people. I'm serious. The way I saw him pivot from the U.S. to China and then move in on the EU, which was America's backyard, is like genius. I mean, in a short time, he has got people in the EU leaning towards Russia
Mhm.
and the Middle East. In the last 2 years that he's moved into Syria, he's like the godfather in the Middle East. Mike was talking about how we got problems among us. The Iranians, okay, we want you to do this job, and and we're gonna protect you as much as we can against the U.S. He's talking to the Saudis. He's talking to the Israelis. So he's like the godfather. He's allowing people to know what you can and cannot do, on my doorstep. Whereas the U.S. used to be that you won't do this, and if you do it, we'll take you out. Russia don't do that. We just sit you down and talk to you and point out to you, this is going to benefit you and that's not going to benefit you. So he's like the godfather, and he is. I mean, from what I've seen, he is brilliant. After the U.S. Even Obama, if Obama, but presidents in the United States are controlled by too many hands trying to control the U.S. president. Whereas in Russia, the hands trying to control Putin are all
Hmm.
pro-Russian also.
They're also alligator arms too.
Yep.
All right, this next one is from the Express.co. Russia war games. Vladimir Putin's army reveals sneaky tactic in new drills. Russian soldiers are dressing up as farm workers and camouflaging military hardware as agriculture and industrial facilities in their latest war games in the Khabarovsk region of the country's far east. Defense chiefs said troops from the eastern military district were taking part of the extensive drills to practice modern warfare techniques in a defensive battle. A spokesman said about 3,000 personnel of a motorized infantry large unit from the Eastern Military District will practice modern warfare techniques in a defensive battle at the uh, Volkansky training range in the Kostrobix region. Special attention will be paid to multi-service force interaction as well as to the techniques of building reconnaissance and fire contours based on the experience of present-day military conflicts. These are pictures of them. The troops will strike a notional enemy force employing about 350 weapon systems, including T-72B tanks, BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles, Govzdika self-propelled artillery guns, Shilka self-propelled anti-aircraft systems, Sani mortars, Grad multiple launch rocket systems, and anti-tank missile launchers. The troops will also fire RPG-7V and AGS-17 Plomya grenade launchers to crush the enemy. Ka-52 alligator strike helicopters of the Eastern Military District's Army Aviation will provide air support for the troops, while the teams of Orlan 10 unmanned aerial vehicles will provide reconnaissance data on adversary targets. In the further show of saber rattling from the Kremlin, a group of the Russian Black Sea Fleet's warships is practicing anti-submarine warfare during the drills. I would assume that the Eastern theater of Russia doesn't see a whole lot of action to begin with. It's usually pretty quiet over there, outside of having to worry about Alaska, flights coming from Alaska in the THAAD missile system in Alaska. I don't see too much conflict going on over there. I'm surprised they're not in the Middle East getting some experience.
Well, they have to keep their soldiers, they keep their training up to par. They don't want them to be too rusty. Now, of course, many of these foreign, like Washington-based foreign policy experts will be like, "Oh my God," they always have this orgasm about a potential Russia-China war in the Far East. Like, "Oh my God, this is Russia," because Russia knows they can't trust China. No, it's just they just want to keep their soldiers, fresh. Um, I don't think there's any threats in the Far East for Russia. Maybe the U.S. is stupid enough to use Alaska as a base to attack Russia, but Alaska's it has a medium-sized military base over there. Like, I mean, there's nothing really there. The military base in Alaska doesn't have the logistics to basically launch an attack against Russia. I mean, even during the Cold
Actually,
War.
they do.
Oh, they do. Because I always assumed that it was always in a defensive posture against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But
No, America has a lot of weapons over there. Just enough to keep the Russians from actually taking Alaska altogether. Because that would probably be one of Russia's final push would be to take Alaska and occupy it. Because they have the icebreakers that go through that region all the time. The Americans don't have any icebreakers to speak of.
right. So the American presence in Alaska is basically a defensive position. So I don't know.
They could shoot down. They could shoot down any aircraft or take out any submarine coming in that vicinity. They'd probably be more worried about a paratroopers dropping in and actually taking the country, because they can drop a whole lot. I mean, it wouldn't take much for Russia to push their way into there.
That's very true. But you know those gun nut Alaskan white boys will probably think, my AR-15, I'm gonna take down these damn Russians. Like, nah, man. The when Spetsnaz comes at your door, man, they gonna, by the time you try to reach for your AR-15, they're gonna blow your life away. So
But yeah, well, if anything, you probably be more afraid to stick around, right? I mean, you got to worry about all of your energy and water resources would be occupied by Russians, right? They'll make sure they take control over that, and then you'll surrender at some point, probably in a few weeks, if not sooner than that.
yeah,
For any country, right? Because even look in Syria, the Americans are denying Assad access to his own oil, which is why the Iranians had to send a ship to go deliver oil to them, and that got confiscated by the British authorities, and also the tankers, the trucks that they sent in from Iraq kept getting bombed by the Americans. So they had no choice but to send a whole entire ship with 1 million barrels of oil just for them.
mhm.
As it stands right now, Syria has no oil.
Yeah,
The Kurds were working with Israel to send oil to Israel on the black market. And now that the Americans are not there, they have no other recourse now. So that's the sort of stuff that you run into.
mhm.
I mean, you'll probably run into the same thing in the United States. A whole lot of your gas stations would be occupied by white supremacists. They'll just guard it with all their guns, and you won't have access to anything. The black community would be in an immediate collapse.
Yeah, and I mean that I think that's a scenario that most black people don't want to think about. I don't want to get off topic, but if you want to know what would happen, we kind of did had a preview what would happen if society was going to collapse. I mean, in Katrina, there were stories like the people in New Orleans, the black people in New Orleans were saying like white supremacists were going around and black neighborhoods were killing black people like dogs. It was real bad. So it's like that's why I'm a firm believer that black people should be heavily armed. We should be prepping. I mean, we can. I don't want to collapse. I don't want that to happen. But we gotta, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And our community is severely unprepared for any, major crisis that goes on in this country severely, and it's scary. It's scary. Our people are asleep. Like it boggles my mind when I think about it.
Mhm. All right, let me get you the last article from Al Jazeera. Stab in the back. Kurdish forces decry U.S. pullout from Syria. The Kurdish-led forces who helped the United States defeat the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant group in Syria have accused Washington of reneging on its commitments by pulling out troops from the country's northeast and clearing the way of a Turkish assault on the Kurdish-controlled region. In a statement on Monday, the Syrian Democratic Forces pledged to defend our land at all costs, with the group of also calling Washington's move a stab in the back. The SDF, led by the Kurdish People's Protection Units, YPG, was Washington's main ally in Syria in the fight against ISIL. In recent years, they have expanded their control in northern and eastern Syria, in a vast area stretching 480 kilometers, 300 miles from the Euphrates River to the Iraq border. Turkey considers the Kurdish forces a terrorist organization linked to the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, which has waged a decades-long armed campaign for autonomy in Turkey. The beginning of the U.S. troops withdrawal came after a statement late on Sunday by the White House that the U.S. would not intervene in the long-threatened Turkish operation. The announcement came after a phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and his Turkish counterpart, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. In early August, the U.S. military, which has pledged to protect the SDF from a Turkish attack, agreed to a security mechanism with Ankara under which Kurdish forces would be pulled back from the Turkey-Syria border, and a safe zone would be set up for the return of the 3.6 million refugees currently in Turkey. Following the agreement, the SDF destroyed YPG fighting positions in northeast Syria before beginning to pull back from near the border. But Ankara, increasingly unnerved by the Kurdish presence near its border, has long accused Washington of taking too long to act on a security deal, and Erdogan announced earlier this week an imminent air and ground operation to clear the border region of terrorists. The SDF, in its Monday statement, decried the U.S. troops withdrawal, saying, despite all of the efforts to avoid conflict, our commitment to the security mechanism agreement, and taking necessary steps on our end, the U.S. forces did not carry out their responsibilities and have withdrawn from the border areas with Turkey. Turkey's unprovoked attack on our areas will have a negative impact on our fight against ISIS and the stability and peace we have created in the region in recent years. As the Syrian Democratic Forces, we are determined to protect our land at all costs. Kino Gabriel, the SDF spokesman, told Al Hadith TV that the U.S. has assured the group it would not allow a Turkish military operation in the region, while Mustafa Bali, head of the SDF's press office, said in a tweet, "We are not expecting the U.S. to protect northeast Syria, but people here are owed an explanation regarding security mechanism deal, destruction and fortifications, and the failure of U.S. to fulfill commitments." The SDF, comprising of both Kurdish and Arab militias, reportedly has 60,000 fighters under its command. The group said it lost 11,000 fighters in the battle against ISIL. There are around 1,000 U.S. troops in northern Syria. So this is interesting, man. Somehow, some way, someone has determined that it's okay to ethnically cleanse a group of people that you consider terrorists, using military force. Not like, oh, they arrested all these people and then they took them to trial and had them in The Hague. That's not what happened. They're talking about just rolling tanks right on top of their heads without even knowing. So just because you live there means that you're possibly a terrorist and that we're going to clear you out. I just don't understand how no one who's opposed to Assad being in power don't seem to have a problem with this.
It is at the. I mean, the Turks are planning ethnic cleansing. Erdogan has said it that they're going to go into northern Syria, create this 30-kilometer buffer zone, so they can push. They can put all those Syrian refugees there because there's been a lot of tensions in Turkey regarding the Syrians, the Syrian refugees. We have to remember, Turks they see themselves as superior. They're kind of racist against Arabs. They think Arabs are just backward thinking, violent idiots, and kind of like what's going on in Europe, where they blame migrants for crime increasing. So a lot of the Turks are blaming that against the Syrians. There's been discrimination, abuse against the Syrian refugees. So Erdogan's just using it as an excuse. He's basically, all right, we're going to kill off all these Kurds and we're going to fill it up with Arabs, and we're going to turn that buffer zone into a Turkish, basically protectorate. And it's just crazy how the world is just looking on to this, because this is, because the offensive started this morning, and as we speak, there's ethnic cleansing going on as we speak. It's crazy. It's nuts. But if it was Assad doing this, well, NATO would be ready for intervention, saying that, oh, he's going to wipe out the Kurds and we need to put a no-fly zone and all that mess.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing, right? 60,000 fighters, right? That's the personnel makeup of the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces. That's not going to be an easy fight. 60,000 people is a lot of people for you to go in and attack. If it was just 1,000 people, I can understand. They'll probably surrender if anything. But 60,000, they're gonna put up a mean fight against you. And if they have ATGMs and Stinger missiles, you're screwed. Because you have no idea where any of these things are placed at. I mean, yeah, you can use satellites to kind of guide you around, and maybe some drones. But people move, man. People move left and right. You have to determine who's a bad guy and who's not. And if you're just saying that everyone's a bad guy, including the women, this is genocide at this point. Somebody would have to make a case to say that Erdogan should be tried by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, for military war crimes. You're talking about dropping bombs on people's heads. You don't even know if they're terrorists or not.
Who's gonna bring it to the ICC? The U.S. can't. The U.S.
Well,
used to be the one who used to bring you before, and now they dropped out of it, so the U.S. can't.
they would
And the
have to go to
Turks,
somebody like Germany.
well, the Germans are not going to do it because Turkey's part of the NATO. It's this thing is more complicated than people are looking at. The Turk the Kurds were paid a lot of money to do what they did and what they will continue to do, and now that money is drying up.
Mhm,
The U.S. don't have that kind of money anymore.
mhm.
You know, if um, Trump can't do that, what he was doing, what other U.S. presidents were doing before, he can't do it anymore. If he continued doing it, the U.S. as a nation is going to fail faster than it is right now. It's if it's going to take China 60 years to become the only superpower on the planet, if U.S. go in continue with what they're doing, it will take 40 years, maybe 30,
Mhm.
and that's all to do with why uh, U.S. pull back now and concentrating on South America and Canada and leaving the rest of the world. You know, they're doing the economic thing against China to keep China from moving in to the areas that they're moving out of. But that's about the only thing they can do,
Mhm.
except for starting a war with a hot war. If, unless they want to start a hot war, then they have to remove all these things. That's why you see the Saudis in so much trouble because they are now they were talked into doing things that they didn't have the capability of
Mhm.
doing over the long term.
Right. Well, it's gonna be interesting because the news I read this a few hours ago was that the Turks, or not the Turks, the YPG would actually take their uniforms off and put on Syrian military uniforms, because then now you would be attacking Syrian forces. I don't know if Erdogan could really stomach something like that, because now you have to justify who you're targeting on the ground. But if everybody has a Syrian military uniform on, are they really terrorists then?
Well, Syria is not going. You think Syria is gonna say, "Hi, don't kill these Kurds because they're Syrians"?
Well,
Nope. That's right.
politically speaking, they would be considered Syrian citizens of Syria, anyways, right?
No, they turned against the country.
No, they're still citizens of Syria, regardless if they turn against the country or not. They're still citizens. They still have
No,
whether they put up a fight against Turkey or they get arrested by the Syrian government for treason. They're still citizens of Syria.
uh,
And another thing you have to look at, another aspect to this is, um, you know, I think the article says like there's about 60,000 fighters in the SDF. There's even reports up to 100,000 because they can mobilize, conscripts, Kurdish conscripts, some Arab allied conscripts to fight for them. So I mean, potentially you could have 100,000 fighters there, and it could get real bloody. That's the reason why the Turks, they've been using, their Syrian Arab proxies,
Mhm.
that they hired, basically mercenaries. I mean, even the Syrian rebels, they call those guys mercenaries to do most of the heavy fighting, and these guys are not well trained. They're not have well disciplined, so
Sit.
you're more likely to have more atrocities committed by these guys, because Turkey's going to send a few troops, and they're going to send a few troops in. The bulk of the fightings will be done by this, national Syrian army, quote unquote, that Turkey has made. And these guys are nothing more than jihadists, mercenaries, but they lack discipline. So you're going to see a lot of atrocities being done, because when you have an unskilled army dealing with an insurgency, they're just going to get frustrated and start attacking anybody. They're
Well,
going to start attacking civilians just out of frustration, and that's going to make things very, very dicey for the Turks. So it's the next couple days are going to be interesting. I would think the Syrian Kurds are going to put up a strong fight. They've been preparing for this. They knew this was going to happen one day. They've been stockpiling in weapons.
mhm.
They got manpower. They got weaponry. It's not going to be an easy fight for the Turks. So and on that talking point that you just said, Mike, about them being Syrian citizens, I don't think there's much. I don't think the government would really care, because the government, you know, they're kind of pissed at the Kurds, because remember they're doing that negotiation with Assad a couple years ago, or was it months ago? Months ago, and the Kurds were like demanding so much shit. They were saying, "Oh, we want a federal, we want an autonomous federal region. We want you to pay for our army when we want to have our own separate army." Assad was like, "Man, fuck that shit." He was like, "You niggas bugging." And then now, now the Kurds are like going back to Assad begging for help, and he's like, "Oh, you want my help now?" And he's like, "Nah, fuck y'all. Deal with the Turks yourself." So
Well, the
that.
thing is, if he allows the Turks to deal with them, they're not going to leave northeast Syria at all. They'll basically occupy his country. He'll have to figure out a way to get them out. And they're not going to leave because you ask them to leave. The only way they're going to leave is through military force, which is something that um, the Syrian government doesn't necessarily have right now, since their resources have been depleted.
Mhm. But keep in mind, just like I said, there's gonna be no Turkish troops come in that region once they take that, because they're gonna make a buffer zone, that 30-kilometer buffer zone. Turkey's military is gonna withdraw, and then they're gonna leave their Sunni Arab proxies there. But those guys are not good fighters, man. Like, it was, I remember Operation Olive Branch a couple years ago. Those guys, their performance was straight trash, man. They can't fight for shit.
Who is
Can't
this?
fight. Hmm?
Who did you just say?
The Turkey's Arab proxies. They call themselves the National Army. It's like
Oh, you mean Jahid al-Sham?
yeah, those
Yeah,
dudes.
they just kind of rebranded themselves. Yeah, the thing is,
They're not good fighters. Like, I remember when they went to Afrin, those niggas were trash, man.
well, the thing is that they're barbaric, right? That's their whole purpose, is to cause destruction. They're basically a demolition squad to come in and just wreak havoc. Their position is not to be strategic at all. It's just the strategy is to destroy everything within that area, make it so unstable that no one else can live there. Which is kind of stupid, because if you're going to rebuild it at some point, you're going to waste your money going there doing all of that. But that being said, um, we'll see what Iran does. Iran has already said something this morning that if Turkey moves in there and hurts the Kurds, then it would elicit a response from Iran. There's a lot of Kurdish families inside Azerbaijan and in Armenia. So that could also play a pivotal role as well, because you may get Armenian help on the ground from the Kurds in Armenia, and actually the Armenian government itself, or Armenian empathizers inside the state. So we'll see what happens. I mean, you still have the KRG, the Kurdish Regional Party, or the KRG, the Kurdish Regional Government inside Iraq, that that is still a contentious player as well. So if Turkey moves in there and occupies a place, then you will see a lot of fighting going on the ground. I don't think this is going to go well for Turkey, because if all these people are armed with ATGs and all that, ATGMs and surface to air missiles, that's gonna be a nasty fight for Turkey. It may be a war of attrition on their behalf, because those tanks are sitting ducks for all intents and purposes. You can't see them in those tanks. You can't see the Kurdish fighters in those tanks, because those guys can sit a mile back from you and hit you with a missile, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, we see what happened in Yemen when Saudi Arabia tried to send their troops into Yemen, and they got completely slaughtered by guys in sandals and dusty blazer jackets.
Yo, it was a shit. It was a bloodbath, man. It was a
Mhm.
bloodbath what the Houthis did to the Saudis, and what they still doing, because they still cross the border, do ambushes and IED attacks and anti-tank guided missiles. Like it's real bad. Um, with Iran, I don't think Iran truly would give any help to the Kurds, because remember the YPG is close with the PKK, and those two groups are basically allied with the PJAK, which is the Iranian version of the PKK, with like the Kurdish version, and Iran has been fighting them, and there's been reports that Saudi Arabia has been supporting those that Kurdish group, because
Mhm.
Saudi Arabia wants an independent Kurdistan, because independent Kurdistan will weaken Iran, Turkey, and Syria,
And Iraq.
and yeah, and Iraq, yep, and that would, and that'll create a strong, solid ally for Saudi Arabia in the region. They're pushing for this. It's been reported that they're the ones who are behind all these attacks in Iran, with these Kurdish separatists attacking the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So I don't think Iran's losing sleep that the YPGs, getting slaughtered. I bet they're just like they're probably low key, co-signing Turkey, and probably dapping up, Erdogan behind the scenes for doing that, because they don't care, because they have no interest of a second Kurdish independent state at all, because they will know that they're next.
Mhm.
I for, I don't think this whole area, all the way from Turkey down to Yemen, the map is going to look the same as it looked today in 50 years. Um, Saudi Arabia is probably going to lose half its territory, and Iraq and Syria, Turkey's going to look different. If it continues this way, then the whole area is going to look different.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like especially Saudi Arabia. I mean, that country is just like, if you look at its geography, it's fucked. The only reason why it's held together because of oil. I mean, you have Shiites in the eastern provinces, that's where all the oil is, and then you have Shiites near the border with Yemen. It's like Saudi Arabia is not gonna last. In regards to Turkey, I don't know. I mean, it's probably going to take probably some unforeseen geopolitical event that will lead to that. I've read many articles. I mean, these are written by Turkish nationalists, so I take it with a grain of salt. Like Turkish supremacists saying like, "Oh my God, these Kurdish, birth rates, the Kurdish birth rates is higher than Turkish birth rates. So sooner or later, independent Kurdistan could happen by 2045 or some shit." I mean, I don't know if that's true. I have to look into that to see if it's true that Kurdish birth rates in Turkey are higher than Turkish birth rates. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see independent Kurdistan happening for a long ass time. Probably probably maybe in the 2050s, 2060s, or some.
No, it will never be an independent Kurdistan, because it goes against the constitution of both Iraq, Turkey, and Syria that they cannot have secession. Just like the United States, Texas can never separate themselves from the United States. You can never carve out a piece of area and make it independent. It goes completely against the constitution, which is why in Syria they could sit up here and tell, oh, we want an independent state. Well, that's never going to happen, right? It's just wishful thinking on their behalf. Now, what they can have is a government backed state, not separate from the country itself. But the idea, because you have to keep in mind, there's 40+ million Kurds, right? All throughout the region. There's 40 million of them. So they're like African Americans. They're like ADOS. They exist in numbers and in physical form, but they have no state. They are stateless. So they are wards of the state no matter what. The problem is that these other countries are playing with their emotions by saying, oh, if you put on this uniform, we'll help you get your own state. And the gullibles will jump out there and say, yeah, I'll go out there and fight. And next thing the United States just pulls out like they did today and say, have a nice day, we'll be back. Going to get some Newports from the store or something like that. And they never show up.
We're basically a hit it and quit it type of situation, basically. But yeah, you're right. I don't see it happen unless something happens in Turkey. If Turkey just descends into chaos, but I don't see that happening in Turkish. The Turks and the Persians kind of have the same similar mindset that they're gonna hold their countries all together. And especially the Kurds in Turkey they've been integrated, into Turkish society. So a lot of the Kurds in Turkey have given up on an independent Kurdistan because all that violence that happened back in the 80s and 70s, they don't want to go back to that. They want stability at this point. So I don't know. The Kurds, what they're going through is kind of a sad situation, but they have powerful nations that don't want an independent Kurdistan. I mean, Israel and Saudi Arabia may want it, but they're not going to go that far to try to provoke Turkey and Iran, because it will be suicide on their part if they try to do it.
Well, I mean, they have quite a few million people to do it. So if they wanted to construct something, they could construct something, but they would have to get international support. I think they only have maybe a dozen countries that internationally that would support them, including Taiwan, right? Taiwan, ironically, of all countries, would actually support them. But I need to end this right now. Thank you all for joining us, man. Hit the like button if you have not already done so, and share the video if possible. Make sure you check the community tab when you hit that notification bell so that you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, those that were posted today. Other than that, we are gone. Peace and shalom.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Mike.
Good night.